my presentation will be divided into 6 sections. Oh, I will touch upon the objective of the paper, then context of agriculture extension in Nepal, then I will touch upon what exactly the farmers to farmers agriculture extension is, and then what is the basis for development of this approach. Then I will touch upon the result and discussion, then conclusion and recommendations. Basically, I have two objectives for this paper. One is to examine the effectiveness of the farmers to farmers agriculture extension, especially to deliver the service for rural poor, which we call disadvantaged group. And another one is this paper is meant for the policy lobby with the policy maker, so that they could be able to formulate the conducive policy for, especially for rural poor. If you see the context of agriculture extension in Nepal, there are 4 types of agriculture extension existed. One is the public sector agriculture extension. The public sector agriculture extension is highly criticized that this is very much centralized system, and which is less relevant and less responsive to the need of the rural people, especially to the DAG, I mean the disadvantaged group. And another one is the neighborhood agriculture extension. It happens spontaneously from one house to another, but it is a very slow process and confined in a very specific areas only. The third one is the NGO-led agriculture extension. This is highly criticized as it's a donor-driven concept, and which is very much less sustainable, as well as it has a very limited coverage for the benefit of rural poor. And another last one is there is a private sector agriculture extension, especially in the dairy sector and poultry sector. It is very much upcoming, and this is also criticized as it's basically a profit motive, and this approach, this private sector extension, is not very much reach to the poor. And having this different type of approach, the agriculture sector is still underdeveloped in our context. There are major 4 reasons behind it. One is it is completely a centralized system. At the local level, there is not much functionaries, absence of functionaries there. And at the local level, the agriculture extension is delivered by agriculture service centers, which one center should cover more than 8,000 households. And many of you know the geographical location of Nepal from Tarai to High Hill, and you can easily imagine that how accessible the agriculture extension is. That is the case. Another reason is there is a sheer lack of human resources in the agriculture sector. The agriculture extension worker and household ratio is 1:1,500, and it's very less. And another thing is that there is a tendency of migration to Arabian country and third world country. Nearly more than 900 people every day they migrate for seeking job, and it really creates the labor shortage for agriculture sector in Nepal. And if you see from the gender perspective, this is highly feminized sector. More than 70% of the total workforce is women because of the migration of male counterpart to other countries. But if you see from the service perspective, less than 10% women are in the position to provide service in the agriculture sector. That is the situation existed. And if you see from the fund perspective, less than 3% of the total national fund goes to agriculture sector, whereas more than 66% of the total population rely on agriculture. I mean, from the it is the neglected sector, though it is called every time the backbone of national economy. And if you see the household per capita distribution, it is less than $0.26 to $6 per household per year that has been expanded in agriculture sector. And another thing is that there is a very weak linkage between extension, research, and education. And that's why we are trying to develop the coordination among research, extension, and education institutions. And another thing is there is a lack of policy which is really focused to poor. This is what the situation is. That's why 20 years agriculture perspective plan has been placed since 95 to 2015. If you see the results, is still more than 25% of the total population is below poverty line. And this sector cover more than 36% of the national GDP, and 66% of the total population, as I mentioned, depends on agriculture for their livelihoods. And more importantly, more than 83% of the total population who resides in the rural area earns their livelihood from agriculture sector. And out of 75 districts, 42 districts are still food deficit in the nation. That is only because of the poor access of inputs and technology to the rural poor. This is the situation. By knowing this scenario, all the agriculture external system is not very much addressing to the rural poor. That means we need to really reform the agriculture sector service delivery, so that we just try to introduce one approach that is decentralized farmers to farmers agriculture extension approach. This could be one of the potential solutions to provide service to the rural poor. And in this approach, as I mentioned, that there is a lack of functionaries at the local level. The Village Development Committee is the lowest rank of the government administrative unit, which need to support to the rural area. And at that level, based on the existing act and regulation, we insisted to formulate agriculture, forest, and environment committee, so that agriculture, forest, and environment goes together. And in that committee, they will plan at the grassroots level. They will identify the needs and prioritize the needs based on the local resources. And it is near to the people, so that the agriculture, forest, and environment committee would be accountable, and they feel ownership, as well as there is a local participation from the very beginning of the planning process, so that this system will function. And as I mentioned, that there is a lack of the funding, and even more than 29 bilateral and multilateral organization working in Nepal in agriculture sector, but they are working in their own way. And the service provided to the community is very much fragmented. Even the local government do not know what the DFID is doing, what the USAID is doing, what the SDC is doing, what the FAO is doing. This is the situation. That's why there is a need to coordinate all the development partners at the local level, and that will be done by the Agriculture, Forest and Environmental Committee, which is the lowest administrative unit of the government. And all the donors and development partners, as well as the government, basket a fund in that unit. Then the planning will be done by a Agriculture, Forest and Environment Committee with the participation of local people. Then at that time, we found that there is a strong coordination and public, private, and people's participation from the very beginning of the planning process. And we believe that, and we found that that will be sustainable if we really involve the people from very beginning of the planning process, and they will get the benefit out of that, then it will be more sustainable approach. And it will reduce, once there is a coordination body and all the plan has been gone through that committee, there will be less chances of duplication and misuse of the resources, which really helps to reduce the corruptions. And as it is near to the people, and they are much more transparent as compared to central government. And as I mentioned that there is the lack of the human resources. To fulfill that gap, we have developed local resource person called experienced leader farmers. And the experienced leader farmers will be accountable to their groups to provide the services. And the local leader farmers will be trained by educational institutions and the government functionaries at the district level, at the mill level. They will be linked with that. And if you see the approach, as I mentioned, there is a lot of private sector, public sector, and government organization working in agriculture sector, and they will develop through the process of social mobilization. They will form group at the community level, and among the group members, there are certain farmers who is really lead farmers. And they will train 1 or 2 farmers. They will give the technical training. Also, they will receive on demonstration plots. What I believe is that the demonstration plot will work as a research station for the farmers, and farmers themselves are researchers. They will find the technology, they will test it. If it is proved that it is very much benevolent to them, then they will transmit that technology to other farmers as well. And they will test the technology. Having a knowledge and technology doesn't mean so much sense until and unless they get the benefits from out of it. So that they have to have the income generation activities, and that plots will give the income, the demonstration plots. And once they know technically from theoretical and practical perspective, it needs to be transmitted to the nearby farmers so that they need the facilitation scale. Then the government organization, they will provide the facilitation skill training, how to teach to the farmers, how to disseminate the technology to nearby farmers. And ultimately, they will become experienced leader farmer, and that will the gaps of extension agent, and they will perform two responsibility. One, they will continuously tested the different technology, and once they get it is beneficial, then they will transmit. And this is the structure. The experienced leader farmers, the Agriculture, Forest and Environmental Committee is the main committee that will make a plan or hold the committee based on the demand of the farmers. Then they will mobilize the experienced leader farmers, right? And the government, private sector, and other development partners, they will just facilitate the Agriculture, Forest and Environment Committee to make the planning at that level. And based on the farmers group would put demand to the Agriculture, Forest and Environment Committee, and based on the resources and the area of priority of the Village Development Committee, they will fund to the farmers groups, and the fund will be mobilized for two purposes. One is for the purchase of agricultural inputs, and another one is for the purchase of service from that expenditure leader farmers. That is the whole idea behind it. The basic principle, fundamental principle that we follow for the development of this approach is two. One is the principle of subsidiarity, and another one is the principle of responsiveness. Both the principles applied for this approach. And the basis is the agriculture policy, national agriculture policy, and local self-governance acts and regulation that has been placed. And from this, what we draw the inferences is from this approach, more than 378 BDCs has been institutionalized this approach at the local level, and there is a co-funding from different donors as well as from the government side, and more than 755 experienced leader farmer has been developed. Out of that, more than 42% are from women, and more than 60% are from disadvantaged groups. And if you see the result of this extension approach, at the policy level, we integrate this approach in agriculture universities in Nepal and different agriculture training center, and the course has been included, and the student has been taught on that approach. And another thing is that government of Nepal, especially the Ministry of Agriculture Development and Ministry of Federal Affairs and Local Development, they institutionalize this approach, and they just outscale this approach in 40 districts from this year, and by next year we hope that it will be spread all over across the country in 75 districts. And at the local level, as I mentioned, that there is system of co-financing from different partner organization is in place. We have major learnings that this approach is very much cost effective, more than 5 times less cost as compared to the public, other private, as well as the NGO owned agriculture extension system. And through this approach, the poor and disadvantaged groups, they get better access of the service, and women farmer groups. We found that there is a greater participation of the community. That's why we just try to call public, private, and people's participation model as well, from the very beginning of the planning and execution and the benefit sharing stages. And another one is, the key thing is that it is very much encouraging approach to empower socially excluded, economically poor, and marginal section of the society, especially women and that disadvantaged group are empowered because they will be the member of the community and they are trained to become experienced leader farmers so that the empowerment level is very high to those groups. And most importantly, this approach is well recognized by the government and there is a local political support, strong local political support for this approach and it's become more popular and this approach is very much acknowledged by the neighboring countries as well and we are providing the conceptual idea to Bhutan, Bangladesh and even in the northern part of India. Though the systems, yeah, I'll manage. There are a lot of challenges. One of the main challenges is, as Madam told this morning, this geography is one of the challenges. And there is a absence of politically elected body now. That is the challenge for Agriculture, Forest and Environment Committee. And there is high influence of elite peoples. And in conclusion, this approach is very much effective approach for the dissemination of agriculture technology to the rural areas. And for this, I have some recommendation to the government that there is a need to formulate a congenial policy for poor and diversified institutional pluralism in agriculture extension is very much necessary. And there is a need to provide the platform for the dialogue for multi-sectoral agricultural extension service providers in Nepal. And there is a need to promote agriculture as investment in agriculture sector. That's all. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.